sounds like this could be a good fit for her. Are there any teachers in this room who like currently are teaching in the classroom? I just want to know if there's anyone. It's okay if there aren't, but are there any teachers who are in the classroom now in grades 5 through 8?
Introduce myself back here.
Okay. Well, that's okay. It's really hard to recruit like practicing teachers to these workshops. Teachers are busy, it's their evenings, but that's okay. I'll just kind of keep that in mind as I present. So I guess I have a different question then. Raise your hand if you know of a science teacher in it could be grade 4 through 8. Ideally grade 6 through 8, but also grade 4 or 5. If you know of a science teacher, and I mean like a formal teacher, so someone or a homeschool teacher, but someone who actually teaches in a school, so not necessarily like a educator at a non-formal, nature center, but like in the classroom science teacher who you think might be interested in planting native plants in their schoolyard as a part of their curriculum. Maybe raise your hand, or if there's anyone who even yeah, just go ahead and raise your hand.
Tom Wellborn had his hand up a few moments ago.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, Warren, I would love to hear just who you know who might be interested.
Tom, would you unmute?
Yeah, Trees Knoxville actually does plantings on Knox County schools. We primarily plant native plants. We get contacted constantly by science teachers and teachers at the campuses wanting to plant. And we planted, I don't know, maybe 20 schools. And we typically work with a teacher at the school who helps maintain the plantings. We primarily plant large trees that have 1.5 to 2 inch diameters. We've done a little bit of native gardening, native plant gardening as well, but we're constantly getting asked by the teachers at these schools to help with planting. So yeah, it's no one particular, but I guess the last one we planted was Pond Gap and a couple of others. But anyway, we're constantly being asked by teachers to do things like this.
Wow, are you a volunteer, Tom, or do you work for that organization?
It's a nonprofit. We've got 2 employees that are paid now, but we've been trying. We've got like 90 plus schools here in Knox County, and we're trying to constantly plant more and more on the campuses. And anyway, we get asked constantly about doing similar education programs with schools.
Yeah, so it's great for me to hear who's in the room because then I can kind of like tailor it a little. But I think that one possibility, if you wanted to email me, and I'll share my email during the presentation, but I will also put it here in the chat, is we could, I think a lot of those teachers that you're in contact with and planting native trees, I assume, in their schoolyard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to put you in touch. I'm a volunteer. I actually am not on the board anymore. I helped start Trees Knoxville, but we just got one of the federal grants to actually go out and do work with underserved communities, and we're going to be looking at those schools in areas that are underserved, and we've done that in the past, but the focus of our grant money will actually be on those communities in the future.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Tom, and I'll move on because I know this is like super specific to Tom right now, but I think it's helpful for other folks to hear. Like what I have to offer is a curriculum that those teachers that you partner with could use to just deepen the experience for their students and fully involve their students in that tree planting that you're doing in their schoolyard. Um, Oftentimes when trees or native plants are planted in schoolyards by outside organizations, it's wonderful. Like it's a wonderful thing, but there's this like missed learning opportunity where the teachers really could integrate that planting project with their curriculum. And so what Symbiotic Schoolyard does is those teachers that you're partnering with, you could just offer it to them. And then, you guys are leading the tree planting project, which is amazing because not all teachers know how to plant trees and what trees to plant, and they don't have the tools. So the fact that your organization is doing that is huge. Symbiotic Schoolyard is a fully developed curriculum that they can use that would work beautifully with tree planting. So I think it'd be really cool for you and I to connect maybe outside of this group and explore how we might collaborate more to deepen the learning experience for those teachers and students. But I'd love to hear from anybody else, and then I'll dive into my presentation soon, I promise. But is there anyone else who is working directly with classroom teachers, middle school science or grade 4 and 5 classroom teachers? Or anyone who might want to reach out to teachers and see if they might want help planting native plants in their schoolyard.
We get questions all the time through our info line on the website from people who want to know more about your very topic. Where does anybody have a program to teach the students? Does anyone how do they get plants? What plants should they plant? Would someone come help them figure out what to plant?
Yeah.
That whole, it's straight from your program.
Yeah.
It worked perfectly with it. So
Cool.
even if we've missed some people tonight, what I will do is go back through all of my questions that I've received from people in the past for the past year or so and start looking and I'll reach out to everybody.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Gail.
Hi. I have worked with middle schoolers and intermediate schoolers in the past with the teachers and everything. But what we found out, okay, I'm with Hickory Valley Garden Club, which is part of the Tennessee Federation of Garden Clubs, and we promote, all kinds of environmental biodiversity, native plants, all kinds of things that we do with the kids. But what I found is we will work with the teachers and we will plant the plants, but then in the summer when nobody's there at school, boom, everything dies.
Yep.
So, how do you combat that when you work so hard all year long? Like say we start in, I ran a junior garden club and we were out there planting all kinds of stuff, but we work really hard to plant stuff and it looks good up until the end of May, end of May, because our schools end at the end of May. Yeah. And then between June, July, August, and they come back maybe mid-August, nobody's monitoring these gardens. Nobody's monitoring the plants. Mm-hmm. They're not getting watered. I mean, like last year we had 45 days or 55 days with no rain, and the school is closed because they don't have any, summer programs or anything in the schools. So how do you combat that when you're trying to work hard to put native plants around the school or in the schoolyard or wherever you're going to put them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'll get into that in my presentation, but just briefly, like there is the most common barrier. Like what you just said is the hardest thing. And it's extremely common. And I can tell you it's a problem in every state. And I work in Washington State, and we support 10 different schools doing this. And it is the biggest challenge. But really the answer is you want a super excited teacher when you don't want, I think what happens a lot is organizations come in, they plant this native plant garden, and you really want to find a teacher who is so excited, and then make it really clear to them and the principal and the maintenance staff, just be really clear, get everyone at the table and say, we will plant this native plant garden, we'll take the lead on it. But you need to meet us halfway. And what that looks like is you need to find a person to water during the summer, for the first X number of summers. And so then the school, then you say, and if you can't do that, no hard feelings, but we won't be planting a garden in your schoolyard. So you want to get everyone at that table. And before you plant a single plant, make sure that the school is going to agree to meet you halfway. But it's not an easy solution. But
Well,
let me go ahead.
you have to deal with the school board and because the water is shut off. I mean, there's no, it's totally closed down.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, some schools even have a fenced in area and it's gated and locked.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it is absolutely a challenge. I don't want to minimize like what a challenge it is. And I support 10 different schools doing this, and it's a mix of teachers who are really passionate and come water during the summer, and they have a key so that they can get access to the water. Volunteers who live in the neighborhood who commit, high school students who are doing community service. Rarely, sometimes you can get maintenance involved or install drip irrigation, but usually schools don't have the funding for that. And yeah, it's a different solution for every school, but yeah, it's a really important thing to figure out from the get-go, and probably one of the biggest challenges, but it is not impossible. It has been done successfully too. So let me get back to my first slide here. And let's see. Go here. And we'll do.
There it is.
From the beginning.
I think you need to hit from the beginning.
Yeah. For some reason, oh, there we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Well,
all right, so let me dive into my presentation, and feel free to interrupt me with questions.
I think Sid has had his hand up.
Oh yeah, Sid, go ahead.
Okay, I'm a she, but you wouldn't know that. But anyway, I just wanted to know if Gail is in Knox County by any chance.
No, I'm in Hamilton County.
Okay, well, because I had a contact for you if you're in Knox County, but I don't know anyone in Hamilton County. So I just wanted to find out. Thanks.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to kind of walk you through Symbiotic Schoolyard, and a little introduction to who I am. My name's Janneke, and I'm the creator of Symbiotic Schoolyard. I have my master's in science curriculum and instruction from the University of Washington. I'm a former middle school science teacher in the classroom. I no longer am in the classroom because I now support other middle school science teachers. And I have many years of environmental education under my belt, and I'm really, really passionate about supporting teachers and mentors, community partners who want to help teachers plant native plants. So I'm just going to go over some today. Sorry. Someone have a question? No. So first we're going to watch a short video about Symbiotic Schoolyard where you'll get to hear from teachers and students. Then we're going to go over the steps to prepare for a restoration project in the schoolyard. And then an overview of the curriculum. So yeah, feel free to stop me and ask questions at any time. And this is a 4-minute video highlighting one of the Symbiotic Schoolyard, actually the first Symbiotic Schoolyard school. This is a fairly new program, very new. And you'll get to hear from some teachers and from some students.
Petersen. I believe that teachers and students have a critical role in solving the biodiversity crisis and a critical place in the movement to plant native plants. I am a former middle school science teacher. My mission now is to support other middle school science teachers in restoring biodiversity to their schoolyards with their students as a part of a high-quality unit on ecosystems. During lesson 1, your students will find out about a global problem we face. Biodiversity is declining everywhere due to human actions. Your students will then take on the role of restoration ecologists to solve the problem of biodiversity loss in their own schoolyard.
Our challenge is to increase biodiversity.
This is an ecosystem unit that is driven by a native plant restoration project in your schoolyard. Through hands-on activities both in your classroom and outside, your students will figure out that native plant communities form the foundation of complex food webs. They apply this understanding to create a proposal for increasing the biodiversity of their schoolyard. They will explain how planting a variety of native plants in their schoolyard restores a food web, thereby increasing its biodiversity.
We are planting native plants in an area of our school. Native plants help the animals around here and they help increase the biodiversity.
Look at what we have now. Do you feel like what you've done now has improved the biodiversity of this ecosystem?
The students are absolutely loving it. They are so excited, not just to come out here and do the work, but I think they also are really recognizing that they're contributing. And I think, there's been a lot of discussions about, why this is important, the lessons that help with that. And it's local, it's right on our site. And the fact that we can, and they can make a contribution right here at Roadkill, I mean, it just is so meaningful to them.
This unit is NGSS aligned, project-based, hands-on, easily adaptable to any ecosystem, and works with any native planting project in a schoolyard, such as pollinator gardens, ecosystem restoration, container gardening, native meadowscaping, and wildlife zones, etc. The unit includes everything you need to teach, including a detailed teacher guide with 13 lessons and a student notebook that has all the handouts that students will need, as well as a PowerPoint for each lesson and assessments.
I get to work with students outside of the classroom in a way that's very different and very fun. They have a chance to get really hands-on with learning about an ecosystem. We've done ecosystem units in the past that students typically find boring. So this unit that we're doing here is the most exciting unit that we do throughout the year, and they get the hands-on experience, which is so awesome.
I am passionate about supporting teachers in restoring their schoolyard using this unit. I invite you and your students to join an exciting, joyful, and absolutely critical movement to reweave the web of life on planet Earth, starting in your own schoolyard.
Any opportunity to get my students outside or get them to engage in real science, I'm all over it. Last year was our first year, and I got rave reviews from my students. Some of my 7th graders this year are even asking if we can go out again. And the big takeaway from last year is I had a lot of students excited to come back even when they're in high school to see the progress of their restoration site.
Okay. This is where I always struggle to get ahead. There we go. So, yeah, I am on a mission to spark a nation. That school that I highlighted was in Washington State, where I live. But this curriculum is adaptable to any bioregion in the country. And I'm on a mission to spark a nationwide movement of middle school science teachers planting native plants in their schoolyard as a part of this curriculum. So what makes what I have to offer a bit different from like the wider movement to plant native plants in schoolyards, whether it's a pollinator garden or, you know, whatever they're calling it, what I have to offer is a way to fully integrate it with the curriculum. And I think it's really worth, like the teacher in that video, Katie, she said at one point that the ecosystem unit she usually teaches, students find boring. And my experience as a classroom teacher was that the only ecosystem units that were widely available to me were based on ecosystems halfway around the world. So most American students right now, when they learn about ecosystems in middle school, and every middle schooler does, they spend anywhere between 5 and 10 weeks learning about ecosystems. It's kind of in the framework for teaching science in this country. But the great majority of those students are learning about ecosystems in the Himalayas, you know, halfway around the world. And so I saw this real need for place-based ecosystems. Why are students learning about tigers in the Himalayas when they could be learning about the species in their own schoolyard? For example, in Seattle, where I live, every public school kid spends 6 weeks learning about ecosystems in middle school, but the ecosystem unit that the teachers use in all Seattle public schools is based on an ecosystem in Costa Rica. So the kids are learning about sloths and Cecropia trees. So there's a real need for place-based ecosystem units. So there are 2 core components to Symbiotic Schoolyard: the restoration project, and that is a native planting project in the schoolyard led by the teacher in partnership with a volunteer expert partner, or what the Tennessee Native Plant Society is calling a mentor. And the second component is the schoolyard habitat restoration unit. And this is it's actually more like 8 weeks ecosystem unit taught by the classroom teacher, in which students take on the role of restoration ecologists to figure out how to increase the biodiversity of their schoolyard. Or for Hayden, who's a homeschool teacher, maybe it's the biodiversity of someone's yard or a park nearby. So there is a driving question during this curriculum that ties the whole experience together. So the driving question is, how can we increase the biodiversity of our schoolyard? And by the end of the unit, students figure out that native plant communities form the foundation of complex food webs. So if we plant native plants, we can increase biodiversity in our schoolyard. And something I always really want to acknowledge with teachers, and this gets a little bit of what Gail was saying too, is being a symbiotic schoolyard teacher is ambitious. And it's entirely possible and worth it. It's ambitious because it involves a real project in the schoolyard with a community partner or a mentor. It's ambitious because teachers have so much on their plates, as we all know. And, taking time to talk with their principal, probably talk with higher ups in the district, figure out where the restoration site's going to be, find a community partner to help them with the planting project. Takes a lot of time. And so it's ambitious. But as we know, there are lots of extremely passionate teachers out there with incredible energy who are going to be really excited about this. And the good news is the curriculum has everything teachers need to teach. So at least they're not lesson planning. The curriculum part is really, really well built out. One teacher called it extremely beefy. in a good way. And that means that it frees up the teacher to find herself a community partner, to get permission from her principal to restore an area of her schoolyard. But I always let teachers know that you can always teach this unit without actually carrying out the restoration project, especially the first year. And then it kind of gives you time to ease into it. So, and again, feel free to interrupt me with questions as I go. This is just going to be a really brief kind of intro to ecosystem restoration, just in the context of Symbiotic Schoolyard. So, I'm going to focus on restoration as a solution to the biodiversity crisis. Of course, we know it's also a solution to climate change, since plants sequester carbon dioxide. But for the purposes of this, the curriculum is focused on biodiversity, not climate change. A lot of teachers bring climate change in to it, but the curriculum is all about biodiversity. So on the first day of the unit, the teacher actually shares recent headlines from the news about biodiversity declining all around the world, including in their own community. And so for Symbiotic Schoolyard, ecosystem restoration is a solution to the biodiversity crisis. So probably most of you in this room are familiar with the concept of restoration, but the Society for Ecological Restoration defines it as the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. And Symbiotic Schoolyard focuses on restoring diverse native plant communities with the goal of increasing biodiversity. So there's different types of restoration, right? Reintroducing wolves to Yellowstone, removing dams. But for schoolyards, we're looking at planting native plants to increase biodiversity. So there are two terms in ecosystem that restoration ecologists use. And these are really important terms, and they're terms that the teacher is going to use and that the students are going to use. And it's important the teacher really understands these. So I always train teachers on this first. And the first is the concept of a restoration site. So it's a degraded, damaged, or destroyed ecosystem that people are working to restore. And we'll talk more about the different types of restoration sites that can exist in a schoolyard. There are lots. A reference ecosystem is a healthy ecosystem that folks study and use as a guide for planning an ecosystem restoration plan for the restoration site, specifically coming up with a plant species list. So how do you know what plants to plant in your restoration site? Well, you don't want to mix like prairie plants with forest plants, with desert plants. You want to have a plant community, a community of plants that comes from the same reference ecosystem, and you use that plant list to come up with your species list for your restoration site. So if you want to learn more about restoration, and also you can call this rewilding, there's lots of different terms for it, but probably most of you are familiar with Doug Tallamy. If you're not, highly recommend reading Nature's Best Hope. I would say that Symbiotic Schoolyard is Doug Tallamy's book, Nature's Best Hope, made into hands-on lessons for middle school science students. And then there's some other resources listed here. And I'll just be quiet for a moment so you can read this quote by Robin Kimmerer, who is a wonderful author. Highly recommend her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, if you haven't read it. So I'll just be quiet for a moment. Okay. So let's talk about the steps for preparing for the restoration project in the schoolyard. So I guess for the folks in this room, maybe you have some native plant restoration knowledge, and maybe you want to reach out to a local middle school science teacher in your community. Maybe you already know one who might be interested, or maybe you're just going to send out some emails and do cold calling and see. This next part of my presentation will be really helpful for you if you're a person in this room who wants to partner and mentor a teacher and be part of a native planting project in a schoolyard, because you and the teacher are going to be working together on these steps. The teacher, like ideally, you're a part of every one of these next steps as much as you're willing to be. So the first step is, and this is kind of geared towards teachers, but find yourself a volunteer expert partner or take a class. So someone who can help you design and carry out a restoration project in your schoolyard. The second step is to identify a restoration site in your schoolyard. The third is to identify a reference site in your schoolyard or nearby, which sometimes is possible, sometimes isn't. We'll talk about that. Order plants, borrow tools. I never recommend that teachers buy tools, especially their first year, too expensive. And then the sixth is to make an ecosystem card set, and that we'll talk about that. That's part of the localizing the curriculum to your bioregion. And before we get into the steps, this is an important question. What kind of project works with Symbiotic Schoolyard? So as I've kind of said before, there are many flavors of restoration, and they're called different things. And basically, as long as the project involves planting native plants, it works with Symbiotic Schoolyard. So like Tom's organization that's planting native trees, that would work with Symbiotic Schoolyard, as long as you're planting at least 3 species of trees. If you're coming in and planting like just one tree, it probably wouldn't work as well. But if you're planting at least a few species of trees, it would work with Symbiotic Schoolyard. So some people are passionate about tiny forests, the Miyawaki method. Other people are into pollinator gardens, rewilding, butterfly gardens, whatever you want to call it, as long as you're planting native plants, works with Symbiotic Schoolyard. So the volunteer expert partner is someone who can help the teacher design and carry out the restoration project. And they can be members of the Tennessee Native Plant Society. They could be a school garden teacher. They could be a master gardener, could be a parent, could be a local nonprofit. Basically someone who can just partner with the teacher to figure out the logistics and bring the expertise that is involved in planting native plants. So let's talk about step 2. So this is identifying a restoration site. I'm just going to make the claim that I think every school in America can do Symbiotic Schoolyard. Every school in America has a restoration site. And that's because it's super flexible what your restoration, anywhere you can add native plants, even if it's a tiny area, will work. So if you have a schoolyard that is completely pavement, no problem. You don't need to dig up the pavement. Do container gardening, right? Doug Tallamy talks a lot about container gardening. So you can just add containers and add native flowering shrubs and flowers. That will work with this curriculum. If you have lawn and a teacher is able to persuade their principal to do a lawn transformation, that can be super exciting. I have 2 schools with lawn transformations here in Washington that I'm supporting. Or if there's an area of the schoolyard that has no existing vegetation, maybe it's gravel, maybe it's just dirt, that will work. Or an area of the schoolyard covered by an invasive species or a weed. That is a very common, schoolyards are often ignored as learning spaces. Like sometimes schools will put a lot of energy into a nice new, I see this so often, like brand new schools here in Washington with fancy buildings, really nice interiors, and the schoolyard's just like not even considered a learning space. And so, I mean, sometimes it is, but it's just overgrown with invasives. And so that an invasive area makes a great restoration site in a schoolyard. And I designed Symbiotic Schoolyard to be really flexible, to like work with all different kinds of schoolyards and all different flavors of native plant restoration. So what I recommend once the teacher has their mentor or their expert partner, I recommend that well, actually, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh yeah, okay, go back. I recommend that the teacher, the mentor, and the principal, and the head of maintenance staff, so 4 people at least, walk the schoolyard together and identify the restoration site as a group. So if you're someone who wants to partner with the teacher, like you should be at this meeting helping the teacher identify a restoration site and listening to the principal and including the maintenance staff. Really important to include maintenance because they know where utilities are. And you might not necessarily want to plant on top of the utilities. So really important to involve everyone at the table from the beginning. The size of the restoration site, I won't go into this too much. It's just really flexible. So it could be really small or it could be big. And one kind of way to think about is how many plants per student do you want to have? So, you know, if you have a class of 300, maybe it's 2 students collaborate to plant 1 plant. Or if you have only 20 students, maybe you have enough for 1 plant per student, or, you know, maybe more plants per student. So it's quite flexible. So this is kind of one of the interesting and fun and challenging parts. The teacher needs to identify, and the mentor could help, identify a reference site. And that's because the curriculum makes use of a reference site. So remember, a reference site is that healthy ecosystem and healthy-ish ecosystem that is used as a guide for the restoration site. And what I tell teachers is this doesn't have to be a pristine ecosystem in your schoolyard, because most schoolyards don't have that. If a teacher has, you know, a little area of their schoolyard that has 5 native plants, use that. Like a lot of schools do have that, you know, and even if there's some weeds in there, that's okay. Use that site. Anywhere, or maybe there's, you know, 5 native plants total scattered around the schoolyard. You can even sort of use that. But if you have a park in walking distance of the school, or if it's a school that is really lucky and has a larger natural ecosystem area, then that's just really lucky. But the mentor can also help the teacher identify this area of their schoolyard. Because again, a lot of teachers, they need that mentor. A lot of teachers don't know native plants. That is not knowledge that they have. So that's where a mentor can also be really helpful. The timing for Symbiotic Schoolyard is really best in the fall. I have a lot of teachers say they start their school year with this because it's a really exciting project-based curriculum and just gets their students really excited for science for the year. But I always tell teachers to consult with their mentor because the mentor will know the best planting window for your bioregion. But once you have a planting date, I just tell teachers to begin the unit 8 weeks before planting because you want to finish the curriculum in time for planting. So like in Washington and I think in Tennessee, Karen told me that you plant native plants in the fall. So fall is a pretty good time. So I always tell teachers, just borrow tools. Don't buy them your first year. You'll have to write the biggest grants to buy tools. So I tell teachers to consult with their mentor about which tools they need, right? It varies depending on the project. And I encourage teachers to look for places to borrow tools. Could be from a local park, organization, parents. And I also tell teachers that you really don't need one tool. You don't want one tool per student. Tools take a lot of time to clean and store. And it's totally fine for, you know, on planting days and other restoration days to have students share tools and also have them do different tasks using different tools. So if you have 30 students in a class, I don't recommend having 30 shovels. I might recommend having 10 or at most 15 shovels. And then ordering plants, which the teacher does in partnership with their mentor, since the mentor is going to help come up with that plant species list. And you want a variety of native plants, ideally at least 6, but could be at least 4. And of course, it's important to choose plants that will survive and thrive at the restoration site, given the soil type and abiotic conditions. And again, that's where the mentor is really important, because teachers don't necessarily know that. Symbiotic Schoolyard works with potted plants from a nursery, and it also works with direct seeding. If you're like direct seeding a wildflower meadow, that works as well. And then I encourage teachers to ask for plant donations or discounts, or apply for grants from organizations like the Tennessee Native Plant Society. So the last step for teachers is to make an ecosystem card set. And basically the ecosystem card set is a card set that has some local organisms from the bioregion, including plants, insects, animals, and it's the way that Symbiotic Schoolyard is localized. So it's a plug and play that works really well. And the students use this card set throughout the curriculum to build towards their understanding that native plant communities support food webs. And so they use the cards multiple lessons throughout the 8 weeks. And it takes the teacher probably a day, half a day or a day to make this card set. And I have a template in the curriculum and detailed instructions about how to make this card set. But it's a really fun way for teachers to start to research the local plants and animals in their bioregion if they don't know them. Okay, I'm going to pause there because I'm going to get into kind of a more detailed overview of the curriculum. But actually, could I get a time check? What time is it, Karen? Or anyone, not to put you on
7:23.
7:23. Okay. So I want to wrap up probably in about 10 minutes, so we have time for discussion and questions, because I think that can be pretty rich. So how about I go for another 10 minutes? I won't get through all my slides, but that's okay. I'd rather hear from you all and chat. So, but let's just do kind of a brief overview of the curriculum in a little more detail. So it can serve as the ecosystem unit for a teacher. There's the standards, which isn't super relevant. The unit pedagogy is NGSS storyline driven, which is kind of education jargon, but basically it means that every lesson ties back to the challenge or the driving question. And this curriculum is student-centered, so each lesson, the majority of each lesson, students are working independently in groups of 4 and following instructions in their notebooks, and this allows the teacher to be a guide on the side rather than a stage on the stage. So it's very hands-on, very student-centered. And that driving question that really drives all the learning during the curriculum is, how do we increase the biodiversity of our schoolyard? I think I'm going to skip this part just because of time, but I'm going to play this video for you. It's a 2-minute video. In this video, the students watch on the first day of the unit. It's 14 lessons in the whole unit. And they get their challenge in this video. And then they watch this video, and then they get a letter that follows up with basically this information written format. So let's just watch this video.
Hello, student ecologists. My name is Janneke, and I'm president of Act Now Science. We face a huge problem. Biodiversity is declining everywhere, including in your own community, due to human actions. But it's not too late. The mission of Act Now Science is to partner with middle school science students like you to help solve the biodiversity crisis. Act Now Science has a challenge for your class. Your challenge is to increase the biodiversity of your schoolyard. Pause the video and write down 3 big questions you have about your challenge. What do you need to know in order to complete your challenge? Now turn to your neighbor and share your questions, and then choose one question that you think is the biggest question, the biggest, most general question that needs to be answered in order to complete your challenge.
So at this point, most students are, at least a few students were like, how do we increase biodiversity?
Questions, ideas, investigations, and hard work over the next few weeks are so important as you work to figure out how to increase the biodiversity of your own schoolyard. Good luck.
Okay, so the problem that they're presented with in the first lesson is biodiversity is declining. The teacher spends like 15 minutes on that. They share some statistics from the IUCN, look at some recent headlines in the news. But the thing is, it's only depressing for 20 minutes because then we get right into the challenge. And the rest of the unit is all about solutions, and it's all about how amazing native plants are. That was really important to me. I, as a teacher, could not teach about climate change. I couldn't teach about biodiversity loss without empowering students to be part of creative solutions. So, I always tell teachers to let students figure out the challenge themselves. A lot of teachers are so excited on the first day because teacher knows that they're going to be planting native plants. And they're really excited. But I tell them to withhold this information because you want students to figure that out themselves. And the curriculum does guide them towards that. And then just a really brief overview of the lessons. This is probably would be more interesting to like teachers who, but it's a little teacher focused. But basically, in lesson 2, students find out that they're part of a global movement to restore biodiversity through the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which is happening right now. So it connects them to global. The third lesson is a plant ID lesson, which actually happens in the reference ecosystem in the schoolyard or a nearby park. If there is no reference, if there's literally 0 native plants in the schoolyard, there's ways to adapt this lesson to bring in plant samples and stuff like that. But the mentor can be involved in this lesson. I have some mentors actually teach this lesson if the teacher doesn't know native plants, or at least work with the teacher on this lesson. If they're comfortable teaching students, that's like a super mentor. So lesson 4 is a really great one. Students do an outdoor investigation. They collect data on the diversity of plants in their restoration site and in the reference site. And they basically see that their restoration site has really low plant diversity, low or no diversity, and their reference plot has high biodiversity of plants. This lesson is all about categorization in ecosystems. This is in the standards. I'm sure it's in the Tennessee standards as well, even though Tennessee hasn't adopted NGSS. It's just very basic. So they categorize organisms in ecosystem into abiotic and biotic, and then into producers, consumers, and decomposers, and plants into native, non-native, and invasive. And that's going to lay the foundation for future lessons. If the restoration site is a lawn or covered by invasive species, there is an invasive species lesson built in. If the restoration site isn't covered by invasives, then this lesson can be skipped. And just as an aside, I think I often see like such an emphasis on invasive species in curriculum. And I get it, like invasive species are a problem. But one of the things I was really intentional about in Symbiotic Schoolyard is the focus is actually not on invasive species, because sometimes the schoolyard restoration sites don't have invasive species in them. But I wanted it to be a bit more positive and focus on native plants. And so invasives come into that, but the focus is really on native plants. So then students get into their planting design and they do a little practice plot design. They make observations of the abiotic conditions of their restoration site in order to choose plants that will thrive. So do we have full sun, partial sun, shade? And that informs their decisions about what species of plants are going to be in the restoration site. And that's where the mentor provides a predetermined list of plants that they're choosing from, because students don't know native plants necessarily. Lesson 8 is just an review of matter and energy, and that really sets them up for lesson 9 when they start looking at how matter and energy flow through a food web. And this is in standards, I'm sure in Tennessee as well, but how, you know, matter and energy is transferred from plants to animals through a food, and from animal to animal through eating relationships. And they make a food web model of their restoration site before any restoration's done and after restoration. So you can see the difference. Before, for example, if your restoration site is a lawn, it will support some animals, maybe deer graze, maybe bunnies, and maybe a predatory bird eats that bunny. But look at the difference when you plant a variety of native plants. You bring in all these native species who have co-evolved with those native plants. And students create this food web using that card set that I told you about earlier. Lesson 10 is a super fun decomposer investigation, which involves getting really hands-on with a pile of decomposers and soil on a tray in the middle of their desk. And they add decomposers to their food web model. And then lesson 11 is all about symbiosis or mutually beneficial interactions. So they learn about how, you know, bees pollinate, how plants and mushrooms work together, how animals disperse seeds. So this and how the implications for their restoration project. And then population dynamics. This is in the standards, and they just they analyze a graph about how populations of organisms influence each other in the restoration site ecosystem. So if we plant more native plants, we will attract more butterflies and more bees, and this will attract, and if there's a higher insect population, this will support a bigger bird population. So showing how populations are connected. And by the end of the unit, they figure out that plant communities form the foundation of complex food webs. So if we want to restore biodiversity to our schoolyard, if we want to increase the biodiversity, we can plant a variety of native plants. And the final lesson is they write a proposal for their schoolyard. And this can be shared with the principal, the mentor, district higher-ups. I really encourage teachers to up the ante, up the stakes on this, and invite community stakeholders, school stakeholders to the table, and to review these proposals that students write. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening. Feel free to jot down my email if this triggered anything for you, got you excited about reaching out to local teachers. I would love to chat. And like I said, I'm on a mission to spark a nationwide movement, and I am open to partnership of any kind. So thank you for listening, and I would love to hear questions, reactions, anything you feel called to share.
I have some comments in the chat that I'll share with you now. April asks, do you feel like it's better for one teacher to adopt this curriculum for one grade, or for a team of science teachers to adopt the curriculum and the project to grow with the students?
I'm guessing, well, yeah, definitely a team. It's always better for a team, right? Because you get a professional learning community. and teachers can support each other. The mentors can even, like, in my like super ideal world, you have a group of teachers in a district or within a school who are working together on this. It's always easier if you're with a team. Realistically, I would say the majority of teachers are doing this on their own. Like one teacher is, found Symbiotic Schoolyard and is doing it on their own. I would love to see more groups do it. And I think nonprofit community-based organizations can help facilitate that by kind of getting together a cohort of teachers. And I think we have to be realistic. Like if Tennessee Native Plant Society got 3 teachers, that would be huge. That would be awesome. Like 3 teachers in the state or 3 teachers in the district. That would be really exciting. So I am working with a group of 10 teachers in Michigan. That's next week. I'm doing a training for them, and they're all part of the same district, and they're supporting each other. So that is really great.
April also comments, you can borrow tools from some libraries. The Nashville Public Library has tool rental.
Ah, like book libraries? That's so cool.
Yeah.
I do not know where in Michigan off the top of my head. Can't remember.
Yeah, it is the book library. They have a, can you hear me?
Yes.
It is it's some kind of it's not Miss Abby, sorry. That's my baby, sorry. Yeah, it's some kind of tool rental that they have through the library, and they have different they have like chainsaws, they have weed wrenches for pulling up invasive species, they have lots of different things. Shovels, of course. But
very cool.
Isaac.
Okay, thank you, April.
Sorry.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, one is, how do you obtain the curriculum?
How do you obtain the curriculum? Is that the question?
Yes.
Through my website, which is symbioticschoolyard.com. I'll just put it in the chat here so you have it. But and there is a cost because I am not yet a nonprofit. I'm looking into becoming a nonprofit so that I can get grants, so that I can offer this all free to teachers. Right now, I can't offer it free because I can't work for free. But I am, I did win, anyway, I'm probably getting into too much detail. There is a cost. And I'm super passionate about this. And if a teacher comes to me and they're like, I'm paying for this out of pocket because my school has $0, I give it to them at a very, very reduced rate. I sometimes even give it away for free if they really have no money in their school. But most schools do, like I've had a lot of teachers who they just ask their school district to pay for it, and the school often has a little bit of money for curriculum, or it can be billed as professional development.
Okay, April commented, sorry, baby hit the power button. I just wanted to say I find the whole program inspiring. It makes me want to enter the teaching field again. She's a former middle school teacher.
Yay.
Yes, yay is true. Cost. Gail asked the cost.
Yeah. The cost is $350, but that is if, and that includes the full curriculum. It includes my one-on-one support. And I really do go above and beyond with teachers because I can't help myself because I get so excited about their project. And I help connect them to community partners and mentors if they need it. I am like on call for help by email. I have one-on-one Zoom consultations with them. So it includes a lot. And then it includes 8 weeks of curriculum. And like I said, I offer a sliding scale. If the teacher's paying out of pocket, I don't allow them to pay $350. I only charge $350 if the school district is covering the cost.
Okay. Danielle comments, our farm to school staff, Murfreesboro City Schools has established a pollinator garden, but they take a few seasons to really take off because they're from seed. What are the low-cost sources of small plugs, etc., of native plants to do this, or would people need to apply for grants?
That might be a better question for you, Karen.
I was thinking that too. There are a lot of sources. The Wild Ones has sales, and they have pollinator kits at a reasonable price that is made up of plugs. A low cost for seeds is from roundstone seed. There are also plant sharings, plant swaps. Wild Ones does a lot of that. We can probably figure out something that would help if you have specifics that you're looking for. Murfreesboro, you have a program coming up in June over at the Wilderness Station in Barfield Crescent Park, and there will be some plants there, and I suspect you could talk them into sharing any leftovers that aren't sold, or maybe giving them to you for free for work with the school. But talk with them. They do have apparently they have a nursery set up somewhere. Are there native plant nurseries in East Tennessee?
No, they are. There's 3 or 4 of them. One is called Oak Hill.
Oak Hill, okay. Give me
I
more.
think it's like in Tellico Plains, somewhere that way. And then there's a, oh geez, we just got through with the Wild Ones weekend, and some of those nurseries were represented. I'm trying to type here. Reflector and Riding, Lookout Mountain. They raise
Chattanooga.
Right. They raise native plants, and I'm sure if, teachers or mentors in Middle Tennessee want to take a little trip, it's a beautiful area. You can hike through Reflection Riding and then stop in their little greenhouses and buy plants on the way out. It's at the back side. It's on the west side of Lookout Mountain.
Good. And do you remember the third? Overhill Gardens is probably in that area too.
I think
there are a number of them in down towards Chattanooga.
Overhill. It's Overhill, not Oak Hill. Overhill Gardens. Tennessee Valley Wild Ones has a list. And you can.
Yes, they do. And we have a list on the Native Plant Society's website, tnps.org. We have a list under more resources, and that includes all of the ones that the Tennessee Valley Wild Ones has, or almost all of them. One comment is a lot of those free native plant giveaways often have leftover plants. I picked up 15 native shrubs for free from one recently by reaching out to the coordinator.
How lucky you, because Reflection Riding and the electric power company had their tree giveaway, and the trees were gone in about an hour and 10 minutes. They were all gone.
Yes.
Every treescape that was there, and they had about 300 treescapes. And I got some last year to plant at a church, a native tree. It was a elderberry tree, mulberry tree. And that's the only one I got. But I tell you what, I asked about it and I said, are you having that tree thing? It was already first week in April, and the trees were gone in an hour and 10 minutes.
We do post the native plant sales that I'm aware of on the website. So if any of you folks hear of native plant sales anytime coming up, send me a quick email. That's just go to the contact page for TNPS. That's all you need to do. It'll get to me, and let me know where and when, and I'll post it on our calendar. So if you need to look on the calendar for the native plant sales, okay? And like has been said, oftentimes if there are leftovers, you can get them for free, just so they don't have to take them and put them back in the greenhouse or wherever. Apparently there's Tennessee Naturescapes in Clinton, I think, if that's correct.
Yeah, I think they were at the expo Saturday. Naturescapes. Yeah, that sounds familiar. They were one of the plant people there. They had about 12.
Okay. The Tennessee Environmental Council has some free seed mixes. Look under Generate Some Buzz. That's the Tennessee Environmental Council. Okay. I will be checking out these suggestions, and those that we don't have on our calendar, I will add. So give me a day or two to get them together, but I'll put them on. Saturday the 11th during Conservation Days. I think that's the Murfreesboro event. Cedars of Lebanon plant sale is May 18th. That's another one. Okay. Any more questions, folks? Any? Last chance. Janneke, this has been lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know I'm excited about this curriculum. I developed a curriculum for teachers also, but that was back 20 years ago, and it was on wetlands plants. So I understand the hard work that you've gone through with this.
Yeah, I did a curriculum for butterflies.
It's a labor of love.
Yeah, curriculum for butterflies that it incorporated language arts, math, and science, and language arts, poetry, and writing stories, and art, because we did some art projects, and that was in a 3rd grade classroom. And then we grew we planted plants, butterfly plants, and then we grew butterflies and, watched them evolve. And then we had a let go party and made butterfly cookies so that and you would not believe this little 3rd grader, little boy, he just cried. He just sat there on the curb and just cried his eyes out because we let the butterflies go. So, you get a little bit emotional there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yes. I just want to say, I'm just because I know that everyone in this room and me, I'm guessing we share the desire for the next generation to learn about native plants and biodiversity and to be empowered stewards of our earth. So, because we share that vision, I'm just going to recruit you all to help me spread the word to teachers in Tennessee, and help me with my mission. So if you have any ideas for me, you can reach out to me. You can email me, symbioticschoolyard@gmail.com. If you have any ideas or about how I could get the word out to teachers, or if you know teachers or have any teacher networks, specifically middle school science, or grade 4 and 5, I would love to see this take off in Tennessee, and I'd love to help support it. Yeah.
So if you end up in the Upper Peninsula for your Michigan venture, give me a call. I'll be up there in May. I'm going to get there in May 9th.
Okay.
And I worked that year that I was up there. I worked with Cherry Creek Elementary School, and we planted a garden. But their season is so short. But they're climate changing. There's climate changing going on up there in the Upper Peninsula, they had very little snow this year. Very little. Yeah, they had to cancel the dog races. They had to cancel the ice climbing festival because the ice was quote unquote soft. They couldn't climb on it. It's just, it was serious.
Yeah.
Lack of cold weather and snow.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's getting late and some people need to eat dinner and some need to go to bed, depending on where you're located. All right. Thank you very much, Janneke. We appreciate this, and I know I will be in further contact with you. So yes, thank you.